I swear I don't know who the father is.
I'm paying you to carry my grandchildren. Tell me who he is.
You're the one who artificially impregnated me. Shouldn't you know who the father is?
Miss Sinclair, this is an operating room. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
I'm not leaving until I get answers. Do not lie to me, Jenny. Who is the father?
Miss Sinclair, she's delivering. Please step back. Okay, Jenny, time to push.
Upon seeing the baby, Jenny felt a warmth and love she couldn't ever imagine.
No, stop!
This boy is a Sinclair. I'm not going to let you put your dirty hands on him.
Please, my baby, someone do something! Don't let her take my baby!
Second one's coming. Okay, Jenny, I need you to take a deep breath and push.
Oh my God, it hurts so much!
I know, you gotta breathe through the pain. Push! Oh, a beautiful baby girl. Okay, Jenny, one more time. Yo, push! Oh, it's a boy.
They were the most beautiful little babies she had ever seen. But Jenny didn't trust the Sinclairs. She suspected their devious plans for her weren't finished.
Jenny. Oh, Jenny. You need to take those two and run.
I can't leave my firstborn.
It's too late. Aster already left with him. You need to get out of here before she comes back for these two.
And just like that, Jenny changed her identity. She was now Quinn Murphy, mother of two. Jenny left the country, determined to protect her babies. She worked hard to provide for them, but it wasn't enough. So she went back to college. She was always the bright one and graduated early with honors. But Jenny still felt incomplete. The thought of her firstborn's well-being haunted her day and night.
Don't let her take my baby!
But now, Jenny was back in town with a new identity and a new job.
Why are we here, Mommy?
You guys were born in the city. We're here to find your lost brother. Jenny! I'm so happy to see you, Miss Simpson.
Ms. Nora Simpson had been a loyal part of the Monroe family since Jenny was a child. Even when the Monroe business fell apart and Jenny's fiancé left her, Miss Simpson stayed by her side.
Jenny! Sammy!
Mommy, is that you?
Jenny was geeky and unimpressive, someone who would get easily lost in the crowd. But Quinn Murphy was the opposite. She radiated confidence.
Mommy, can we go to the zoo?
I promise I'll take you to the zoo. But first, Mommy has to go meet with her new boss. Keep an eye on Denny's jacket. He loses everything.
Oh, no problem. Good luck today. I'll have a homemade feast for you when you get home.
Jenny was joining the Roosevelt Hospital as a neurosurgeon, the same hospital where she gave birth 6 years ago.
Quinn Murphy. Welcome to Roosevelt's Neurology Department. I'm Dean Crawford, head of the surgical department and your new lead.
Excited to be on board.
I have to ask, with a resume like yours, why Roosevelt? Why not go to the best of the best? Ms. Murphy?
Unfinished business, I guess.
Dr. Crawford to surgery. I repeat, Dr. Crawford to surgery.
Duty calls. We'll continue this later, I promise. Meanwhile, take a look around, make yourself comfortable, and I'll see you in the morning, bright and early.
Jenny had left a lucrative position at the National Institute for Medical Research in London to return home. She was determined to find her firstborn.
I will not let you put your dirty hands on him!
Don't let her take my baby!
Jenny wondered if her child was even alive. The thought weighed heavily on her heart.
Oh, sorry. You all right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Denny, what? Did you follow me here?
Who's Denny? I'm not Denny.
Jake, where are you?
Quit playing games and come out right now!
Please, don't let him take me.
Where are you, Jake?
What do you mean my son was kidnapped from the hospital?
Mr. Smith, I can explain.
You can't explain shit! You had one job, to look after Jake. What am I gonna tell his mother?
He went to the restroom during his medical checkup and he just disappeared.
Review the security footage. And find my son. I'm on my way right now.
Yes, sir, I'm on it.
Find Jake. Or I won't just fire you. I will kill you myself! Ah!
We're just gonna eat, then we'll take you back, okay?
They don't let me eat burgers at home.
Jenny felt a strange tug of curiosity and hope, struck by the uncanny resemblance between Jake and Denny. Could this boy be her firstborn?
Why did you run away like that? It's not safe to go with strangers.
You're not dangerous, are you?
No, Jake, I'm not dangerous. I just want to help.
I wish you were my mom.
Where is your mom?
Step away from the child.
Officers, this is all just a big misunderstanding. All I did was take the kid out for a meal.
Save your explanations for the station. You're under arrest for child abduction.
Get this woman out of my sight.
No, please don't take her away.
Let's go.
She's my mom.
What have I told you about talking to strangers? And why were you calling that crazy woman your mom? Beatrice is your mother, and you know that.
She hates me. She's only nice when you're around.
What's gotten into you, bud? Hi, Beatrice. Your son's having a rough day. I think it's best if you don't come around today. I'll call you later.
Dad, that lady was really nice today. Could you make the police let her go?
If you promise to behave and take your medications, I'll let her go.
I promise.
Lance, call the chief and ask him to drop the charges.
You got it, boss.
How could Jake have established such a bond with a stranger so swiftly?
Hey, are you all right? Oh, was everything okay at the hospital? Come here.
Jenny recounted her stressful day to Miss Simpson, running into Jake, the child of the powerful Fred Smith, with an uncanny resemblance to her own son Denny, being arrested for child abduction, then suddenly being released. Miss Simpson could tell that Jenny was afraid.
Dr. Murphy to surgery. I repeat, Dr. Murphy to surgery.
An overwhelming sense of fear gripped her like a vice, as if Miss Sinclair wanted her and her children dead.
We need to talk.
Dr. Crawford, I can explain. It's all just a big mix-up.
That's all been taken care of. Mr. Smith didn't know you were a doctor in this hospital. In fact, you're going to be treating Jake from now on. He'll be here any moment.
What is Jake being treated for?
He's been coming to this hospital for behavioral issues and temper tantrums, and he's prone to violent outbursts.
You're here. I was worried I would never see you again.
Hi, sweetie.
Mr. Smith, allow me to introduce our new neurosurgeon, Dr. Quinn Murphy.
Fred felt something as he shook hands with her, but he couldn't quite grasp what it was until finally it hit him. He had met Quinn before. Does Fred know more than he was letting on? Will the truth come out about Jenny's past?
I apologize for the misunderstanding. My assistant thought you were some random lunatic and not our new doctor.
Quite all right, Mr. Smith. Hop on up and we'll begin the exam.
We'll leave you to it then.
Will you take me to burgers after the exam?
We'll talk to your dad about it, but first I have to ask you a few questions, okay? So I read your chart, outburst, medications. Is something bothering you, Jake? Is everything okay at home?
I just get really mad because of my mom. She's not really my mom, and she's mean to me when no one's around. She hates me.
All right, Jake, I believe you. I'm gonna ask you an important question, and I want you to answer it honestly. Can you do that? Does your mother ever hurt you?
Jenny's heart broke upon hearing this. She knew what she had to do. She needed to immediately convene with Dr. Crawford to gauge whether the situation was serious enough to be reported to authorities.
I'll be right back. Can I speak to you in private?
Something wrong with my son?
I haven't done any neurological exams on the boy yet, but I just need to speak with Dr. Crawford.
You haven't even examined him yet, and you already need your boss's help? Doc, is she even competent enough to treat my son?
All right, calm down, Fred. I'm sure everything is...
I need to know. I do not trust just anybody with my son. Is he okay, Miss Murphy?
Quinn, it's okay. He's the father. What's going on?
Jake seems to be under significant stress. It seems to be something going on at home.
What are you accusing me of, Dr. Murphy? You think I'm torturing my own child?
No, not you. Your wife. I need Dr. Crawford to tell me how to proceed in light of this information. We are legally required to report all abuse to the authorities.
You're telling me you think my wife is abusive?
I only know what Jake told me.
This is outrageous. How dare this woman throw such allegations against my family? I will have your medical license revoked.
Don't you care about your son's well-being, Mr. Smith? I did you a favor by coming to Dr. Crawford. Maybe I should have just immediately reported you to the authorities.
I should have never dropped those charges against you. I'm taking my son home. Jake! What kind of outfit are you running here? How can my son go missing twice in 2 days? You were gonna pay for this.
Jenny thought of how much Jake looked like Denny, her son. Same age, same height, same hair. It hit her. Jake was her missing son, and he was being raised by this horrible man.
Fred, please, calm down. I'm sure he's around here somewhere. I'll alert the facility. We will find him.
Damn right you will, and get this woman out of my sight. I demand her to be fired.
Let's not be too hasty.
You need to do something. I will have this place on lockdown if my son isn't found in an hour.
I'm sorry, Quinn. I'm gonna have to suspend you, pending an investigation or until we find Jake.
This is wrong, and you know it, Dean.
I know, but Fred Smith is not just the president of RexCorp. He's our biggest donor and a senior member of the board. My hands are tied.
So you just bow down to him every time he decides to throw a temper tantrum?
I am truly powerless here. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry.
Attention all staff. We have a code purple. Please be on the lookout for a lost child.
Miss Simpson?
Jenny, are you all right? I just heard there was an emergency at the hospital.
The boy, Jake, he's missing.
Again? Oh dear, I hope they find him.
I'm sure they will. Fred Smith is a powerful man. I don't know if Jake's safe with him.
What do you mean?
I'm his mother. I know I am. And he needs to be with me and his brother and his sister.
Calm down, Jenny. I'm outside with the children. I just rushed here as soon as I heard. I'll see you soon. Your mom's coming now. Sammy, where's Jenny?
Looking for Mom.
Jenny!
Jake! Can you stop running away? I'm gonna get in serious trouble. Let's get you home.
Jake knew he should set the record straight and stop Fred from taking the wrong boy home. But he had wanted to get away from his father for so long. This was his chance.
Jenny! Jenny! Jenny!
I'm not Jenny.
Come back to the car right away. You can't just wander off.
I'm not Jenny.
Thank you for coming, Miss Simpson. Were they behaved today?
For the most part.
But Jenny had no idea that her firstborn son, the one that was taken from her, was sitting in her car instead of the child she'd raised all these years. But what would happen to Denny now that he was under the care of that terrible man? And worse yet, what would Fred do when he found out who Jenny really was?
I'm sorry. I couldn't live with myself if anything happened to you. I love you more than anything in the world. You know that? Denny, with his wide eyes and feeling totally in over his head, just nodded. As Fred continued to address the little boy he thought was Jake. Son, are you really that afraid of your mother? He asked. No, said Denny, somewhat clueless. Quinn was a wonderful mother. Why would this man think anything else? Then what is it? You can tell me, continued Fred. I know you might have been afraid to tell me the truth. That's okay. You're not in trouble. He tousled the boy's hair lovingly and called his assistant, Lance, to have dinner ready for them when they made it back to the penthouse. Over in Quinn's family minivan, heading in the opposite direction, Jake Smith was having a similar experience. He'd snuck into this car, and now the nice doctor lady from yesterday was calling him Denny. So was this little girl, and an older woman up front driving. It was kind of funny. He wondered how long he could keep this joke going. How about some chicken nuggets for dinner? Said Quinn, as Nora drove them to their house. Wow, I've never had chicken nuggets in my whole life, thought Jake, thrilled with the possibility of trying something new that he'd never been allowed to have. Yay! Both children yelled enthusiastically. Quinn was so tired and spent from this crazy day that she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Hadn't Denny been wearing a different outfit earlier? No, that didn't make any sense. Quinn sighed, laid her head back on the headrest, and closed her eyes momentarily, thinking of what to do about her job at the hospital. She wouldn't tell Nora or the children, at least not yet. She would try her hardest to get her job at Roosevelt Memorial Hospital back. Fred Smith wasn't going to stop her. However, across town at Fred Smith's penthouse, her son, Denny, was now seated in an ornate dining room at a very long table. People were all fussing over him and still calling him Jake. The man in the fancy suit sat at one end of the table, and a lady with a lot of makeup sat on the other end. I'm sure your mother has been worried about you today, said Fred, gesturing to the woman at the end of the table. That's not my mother, said Denny matter-of-factly. She is? Now, come on, reiterated Fred. No, she isn't. Jake, we've talked about how hurtful it is when you say these things about your mother. Denny exhaled and looked up into the large crystal chandelier with amazement as a chef placed a plate on the table in front of him. The boy looked down at his plate, confused. What's this? He asked. The woman at the table clenched her jaw. It's veal bolognese, said the chef gently. The boy started picking at it with his fork, curiously, and eyeing it with suspicion. Veal bologna? Asked Denny. That doesn't sound very yummy. The woman exhaled loudly, her frustration evident. Fred cleared his throat. Chef Julian, will you please take Jake into the kitchen and find him something else to eat? I'm sure this is delicious, but it's been a rough day for him. Certainly, sir, agreed Chef Julian and accompanied the boy to the kitchen. thinking privately about how nice it must be to be this rich and be able to have an array of dinner choices ready at a moment's notice. He ran away again, and now he's refusing to eat his dinner? Complained Beatrice. And he's still arguing that I'm not his mother. You need to check him in somewhere, Fred. He's getting worse. No thanks to you. Fred narrowed his eyes on his wife. I don't know what you're talking about, cooed Bernice, but I'm sure you will enlighten me. Do you know why he ran away this time? Boomed Fred. Because he's an incorrigible problem child with mental health problems? Said Bernice. No. I learned today that you have been hitting our son. Is that true? Oh, please. Even the Bible says if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. You may let him get away with turning his nose up at dinner and having Chef Julian cook him something new, but I certainly won't. You're turning the kid into a spoiled brat, Fred. That's why he acts like this. I had a leading neurologist say today that Jake's problem is psychological. His extreme distrust and fear of you are what's causing him to act out. And if you're hitting him, we never agreed to that. I believe what my son is saying, that he's scared. You believe him over your own wife, who carried him in her belly. You think I wouldn't know my own child? Said Beatrice, sounding wounded. If we're being completely honest, Beatrice, I took your word for it. I'd just seen you for Christmas, but almost right after, I went back overseas for the army. Then our truck was blown to bits by that roadside grenade. It's the last thing I remember about my time in Afghanistan. Do you have any idea what it was like for me? Being in a coma for 3 years after something like that? Well, neither do I. Because I was in a coma, Beatrice. And then I wake up, and surprise, I have a son? I've never questioned you about it, not once. But now, I have questions. Jake is right. You don't cuddle or kiss him or treat him like other moms treat their kids. You act like he's just some nuisance, an inconvenience. I can't believe what you're insinuating, said Beatrice. That's cutthroat, even for you, Fred. That's enough. Just stop, said Fred with an air of authority. Pack up your things, Beatrice. I'll have Max watch you to make sure you pack only your own belongings. You are to leave this penthouse immediately. You will never hit my child again. You'll be hearing from my lawyers. Fine. You'll be getting the bill, said Beatrice, standing up and tossing the chair aside with a crash. I always do, mumbled Fred, who had spent hundreds of thousands per year on spa treatments, clothes, plastic surgery, country club memberships, and more for this woman. I'll take you to the cleaners, said Beatrice. You can try, said Fred. But that will be awfully hard now that I have the chief surgeon from Roosevelt Memorial Hospital able to testify to the fact that you were abusing your son. You wouldn't, accused Beatrice. To protect my son? Of course I would. I would do anything for him. I'm his father, regardless of what any DNA test might say. And you know that I'll be asking for one. You son of a yelled Beatrice. I'm going to the Four Seasons, to the presidential suite, or whatever will cost you the most. Enjoy it while you can, sweetheart, said Fred nonchalantly as Beatrice stamped out of the room with indignation, shaking it off. Fred then noticed the boy, standing in the open kitchen doorway. How would he explain all this to him? I told you I don't need medicine. You can't make me, yelled the 6-year-old boy, running away afraid. While young Jake Smith had escaped the hospital and headed right into the Murphy family's minivan and was now masquerading as Denny Murphy, the identical brother he didn't even know about, Quinn's son Denny was now high up in a luxurious penthouse, being mistaken for Jake Smith and being asked to take Jake's medicine. The man wielding the pill bottle, Fred Smith, had taken him home, thinking he was Jake. And while Denny had fun with it for a while, taking limos to a fancy penthouse and eating dinner made by a professional chef, now Denny felt like he was in over his head, especially since Fred was now trying to make him take medicine. "Jake," began Jake's father, Fred Smith. "We've talked about this. The medicine will calm you down and help you go to sleep a little bit easier." "I don't need it. There's nothing wrong with me. You even told the mean lady the same thing before you sent her away." "That mean lady," answered Fred, "is your mother. I'm sorry you heard our argument. That's not fair to you. But this medicine was prescribed for you by a doctor." "My mother's a doctor," said Denny, telling the absolute truth about the life of Denny Murphy. "What? Your mother isn't a doctor, and she isn't here. I'm here. And I want you to feel better, so just take the medicine, okay?" sighed Fred, addressing the boy he thought was his son, Jake. Fred was weary. Why did parenthood have to be so difficult? Fred loved his son, but these kinds of refusals sure got tiresome. "Fine, I will," said Denny, sick of arguing too. He realized that he could either just take the medicine or be forced to, and he didn't want to be forced. He walked back to the bed and accepted the medicine. The pill scraped his throat as it went down, but he held his little dog finger puppet in his hand and drifted off to a contented sleep within minutes. On the other side of town, Jake Smith continued his escapades as Denny Murphy. He had the time of his life eating chicken nuggets for the first time, even if he was confused about this other family having such a small house and no resident chef. Didn't everyone have their own chef? He really liked Chef Julian. He liked going into the kitchen and hearing the old man hum to himself as he sharpened his knives, cut vegetables as fast as the wind, and flipped his pots and pans around in a flash. There was always something to see in Chef Julian's kitchen. Nora Simpson, the Murphys' nanny, didn't seem to know any kitchen tricks. She had simply removed a bag of chicken nuggets from the freezer and toasted them in a small toaster oven. Jake couldn't believe how peculiar this was. "Nanny," said Jake, "aren't you going to chop anything really fast with your kitchen knives or do any cool tricks with your frying pan?" Sammy Murphy, Denny's sister, laughed at this. "Isn't there anything for me to stir or taste?" Jake continued with disappointment. Began Nora, thrown by the boy calling her nanny instead of Nora. "No, I'm not going to flip frying pans around. That's not safe. I could drop them and hurt somebody or break the pan. Just eat your dinner, mister. You know we have an important day tomorrow. We're going to see about finding you and your sister a nice new school." "I liked our old school," said Sammy sadly. "I miss my friends. I miss the parks. I miss the red telephone boxes." "Aw, honey," said her mother, Dr. Quinn Murphy, who had just appeared in the doorway after changing out of her work clothes. "I know it's hard moving to a new place, but I promise you'll make new friends. We can go to Central Park and you'll see all kinds of exciting things that are way better than red telephone boxes." "Do you mean it?" asked the girl a little skeptically, warming Quinn's heart. "Absolutely," said Quinn. "And tomorrow, we are visiting a great new school to see how you like it. I know they have a dance studio and art classes, and maybe you can even learn a musical instrument. Would you like that?" "I want to play the drums," said Jake. "Too loud, sweetie. I think the neighbors would prefer it if you chose a different instrument. I know I certainly would. So, no drums, no trumpet, no bagpipes." "Aw," said Jake. Quinn started to tickle the boy, and he laughed. Soon, she was in a tickle fight with both children. "You're the best mom I ever had," said Jake as the laughter died down. "Why, thank you, honey. I love you too," Quinn replied, her heart swelling with love for her children. But momentarily thinking again about the boy at the hospital, Jake Smith, and the possibility of him somehow being her long-lost firstborn triplet. What would Denny and Sammy say if they knew they had a brother? Quinn forced her mind back to more important matters. Right. It's bath time, you two. You're first up, Denny, she said. The children grumbled but made their way upstairs as Nora cleaned up after dinner. Quinn started the water running and helped the children pick out clean pajamas. Jake liked Denny's pajamas better than his own. Back home, Jake's pajamas were matching sets and shiny material with cursive letters embroidered on them in gold. They were boring. These pajamas were blue, had footies and a big long zipper, and had pictures of dinosaurs all over them. Jake decided that whenever he got home, he would ask his dad for some pajamas with dinosaurs on them. They looked so comfortable. Jake couldn't wait to wear them. You know the drill, sonny boy, said Quinn, turning off the bath water. Clothes off and get in the tub. I'll be right back with your towel. I need to check that your sister is getting ready to jump in. Okay, Mom, Jake said, thinking about how comfortable it felt to call Quinn that. As Quinn left the room to make sure that Sammy was getting ready for the bath she'd be taking right after her brother, Quinn smiled at Jake and shut the door as he took his shirt off. Had Quinn stayed in the bathroom for just 5 seconds longer, she would have noticed the birthmark on Jake's lower back and known immediately that he was not Denny. Jake slipped into the warm water, wondering how much longer he could keep up this charade. In a downtown high-rise across town, Beatrice had checked into the most expensive suite at the Four Seasons Hotel. She was already lying back on a chase, a towel wrapped around her head, cream on her face, and cucumber slices covering both eyes. One technician was attending to her feet, while another one buffed her nails. Beatrice luxuriated in the comfort of the plush hotel bathrobe. She was finally going to be free of Fred and his obligations, and free of that little brat, Jake. The divorce would bring her as much money as she would ever need to live a comfortable life. And now, she could do whatever she wanted and see whoever she wanted. Beatrice sighed a contented sigh. However, her reverie was soon interrupted by the arrival of her mother, Cheryl. "You stupid, selfish, foolish girl," cried Cheryl as she loomed over her pampered daughter. "You need to go back to Fred, immediately." Beatrice just laughed. "He threw me out, Mother, and I'm glad. No more boring, stuffy social events, no more pretending to like that child. I'll get millions in the divorce. Everything I did, everything we worked for all these years, gone in an instant, because you couldn't be bothered to treat the child nicely," hissed Cheryl. "Oh, Mother," sighed Beatrice. "Your theatrics are tiring." "Beatrice, do you somehow not remember what's at stake here? What if Fred demands a DNA test?" "He already said he was going to demand one, but Jake was his son, no matter what the results say," Beatrice yawned. "That's when he thought the issue only related to his paternity. But what happens when he learns that Jake, well, that is more complicated altogether? What happens then?" "It hardly matters," answered Beatrice. "He loves that boy, dotes on him, spoils him even. That isn't going to change. Do you understand that the second he finds out about the child's genetics, he will want answers? And there will be an investigation. And you and I could both go to jail. Jail, Beatrice. Do you get that?" "I don't see how I would be the one going to jail," Beatrice said. "You're the one who stole him from the hospital. When your father died, I used the insurance money, all of it, to pay that wretch of a girl to carry those babies. But she changed her mind at the hospital. She wanted them after agreeing to hand them over to us. I had no choice. We had a plan in motion that couldn't be stopped," said Cheryl. "We both knew that the only way we would be set for life was to have that CEO's son wake up from his coma, see you, and be introduced to his son. And when he didn't remember you, I had all those photographs made. He believed you then. Pictures of you and him on dates. Pictures of a proposal that never happened. Well, He was certainly at the wedding, laughed Beatrice. It was in all the society pages. Cheryl continued. The man was in a coma for 3 years. He woke up groggy and we showed him things that weren't true, that we faked, and presented him with a boy and told him it was his son. He believed it. You were home free, Beatrice. He believed it. He believed it all. Cheryl eyed her daughter with contempt. I'd go down for kidnapping and fraud, and you down for fraud and for being an accessory to kidnapping. Do you think that isn't going to come out during a messy divorce? Think again. Beatrice rolled her eyes at Cheryl. I've been diverting funds for years at this point. Fred has so much money he wouldn't even notice. A little here, a little there. We'll be fine. And then the divorce ruling will leave us much more than fine. Beatrice scoffed, not worried at all about her mother's fears. Great. So we add embezzlement to the list too, hissed Cheryl. This just gets better and better. Did you not for 1 second spare any thought for the prenuptial agreement you signed before marrying Fred? The one his lawyers insisted on before he was allowed to get married. I haven't cheated on my husband, Mother. Beatrice pushed back. That will help, certainly, but I have Sid Feldman reading through the fine print. You may have ruined us, Beatrice, and all because you couldn't even fake being a good mother to that little boy. You could have just been nice. Would that have killed you? He's not a bad kid. Mother, he's so annoying. He's whiny, he's demanding, and he hates me. Beatrice? Began Cheryl. If you had any kind of maternal instinct, you'd recognize that children don't hate. They can't. They can get frustrated when they don't get what they want, sure. But they don't act out like Jake does unless there's something going on. What are you saying? Asked Beatrice. I'm saying that you trapped yourself in a vicious cycle. You started hitting the child. Then he acted out against you. Then you hit him for acting out. It goes around and around. How do you think that will play out when he's a teenager? I don't care, Mother. I'm out of there, remember? I won't have to be around him anymore. The standoff was cut short by Cheryl's phone, which rang to the tune of a Beach Boys song. Cheryl answered. Sydney, Cheryl said. Talk to me. Beatrice watched her mother's face widen with shock. Cheryl covered her mouth and flopped herself down on the chase next to the one Beatrice was sitting on. Beatrice waved away the manicure and pedicure technicians and tried in vain to overhear both sides of her mother's phone conversation. Oh my God, said Cheryl. Then that means... Cheryl's voice trailed off blankly as the attorney continued to deliver his take on what Fred and Beatrice's prenuptial agreement had in store. Okay, thank you. We'll be in touch. Cheryl hung up the phone, and her hand fell limply at her side as she brought her other hand up to her eyes. What? Beatrice asked. What did he say? Beatrice, began Cheryl, you must find a way to make up with Fred immediately. We have no choice. Do whatever you have to do. You have to get him back. I don't understand. What did the lawyer say? Asked Beatrice ominously. Cheryl's eyes brimmed with tears, and she took a moment before giving her daughter the news. You're penniless, Beatrice. Beatrice's stomach sank. Penniless? This has to be a mistake. There was one thing she knew for sure. She sure as hell wasn't going to stay penniless for long. She had to get to the bottom of this. Fast. And no one, least of all Fred Smith, was going to stand in her way. I will not be penniless. I was meant to be rich. Beatrice screamed at her mother, Cheryl, who was digesting the news they'd just heard from their lawyer. Well, then you've got to win Fred back. And you've got to win him back now, Cheryl snapped at Beatrice finally. Are you sure that lawyer knows what he's even talking about? Beatrice stomped around her penthouse room at the Four Seasons Hotel, a grand view of Central Park in front of her. Yes, Beatrice, you are in the wrong here, Beatrice, I'm afraid. Cheryl shrugged. We both are, Mother. If I go down, so do you. Beatrice may have conned Fred after he woke up from his 3-year coma. She may have convinced him that they were in love and that she was the mother to that spoiled, rotten child, Jake. But Cheryl had done all the planning. Cheryl probably knew who Jake's real father was, but Beatrice knew better than to ask any questions. Cheryl had even gotten that sad, pathetic woman to be the surrogate, so that Beatrice didn't have to go through the ordeal of pregnancy. For Beatrice's part, she'd just shown up at the hospital and done exactly what her mother told her. But Beatrice and Cheryl both loved being rich, and were not going to give that up, no matter what it took. Suddenly, Beatrice stood up and walked over to the telephone in her room and dialed down to the front desk. Hello? What are you doing, Beatrice? You're wasting precious time here, Cheryl snapped. But Beatrice just ignored her until she'd hung up the phone, satisfied. Beatrice had made Fred fall in love with her once. She could do it again. And she would look good doing it, all on Fred's dime. I'm getting Fred back, she announced, flopping back down on her plush king-sized bed. Meanwhile, across town, Fred was still working on controlling Jake, but in the course of the new day, he'd seen something of a shift in him. Jake had suddenly become obedient. It's time to take your meds, Jake, Fred, Jake's father, urged, expecting another fight like the one they'd had the day before. But Denny Murphy, who was pretending to be Jake Smith, just nodded and held out his hand, his beloved finger puppet on his finger. Fred smiled. He didn't know what happened to his son, but he liked this change in him. The medication must be working, Fred thought. Fred knew that keeping that useless Dr. Quinn away from his son had been a good idea. She deserved that suspension. Really, he should have had her fired. But then, Fred stopped himself. Why did he keep thinking about this Dr. Quinn Murphy? Meanwhile, Denny put the pill in his mouth. Fred handed him the glass of water. Denny took a sip. Fred patted his head. Good job. Fred patted his son's head. The meds make you feel better, don't they? Yeah, I guess, Denny agreed. However, just then, Fred's phone rang with a work call, and he turned away from Denny to answer. Denny swiftly took the pill off his tongue and hid it in the finger puppet, just in time as Fred soon bounced back into the room, announcing, All right, Jake, come along now, it's time to get ready for school. What school do I go to again? Denny asked earnestly. But Fred just laughed and shook his head. Very funny. Come on now, get dressed. Your teacher is waiting for you. But seriously, what school do I go to? Denny asked again. You're homeschooled, Jake. You know that. But what about friends? Like friends at school? Fred shook his head. Maybe those meds weren't working after all. Fred couldn't believe this. Jake had been homeschooled for his entire childhood. He'd never had any complaints. Look, I don't have time for this, Jake. I need to get to work. The teacher's waiting for you on the 3rd floor. Hurry along now. Unsure what else to do, Denny wandered his way towards the 3rd floor, all the while whispering to himself, Homeschool? What does homeschool mean? As Denny grappled with the strange world of the ultra-rich, Jake, who had taken on Denny Murphy's life, was excited to begin his first day of actual school. He'd never had classmates before. His father had never allowed Jake to attend real school. Now, Jake couldn't wait to make new friends. It was all he would talk about. Are we going soon? I just can't wait to get to school. Real school, Jake told Quinn, Denny's mother, excitedly. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Quinn smiled, holding Jake and Sammy's hands as they crossed Central Park to their new school. The school itself was a towering building where half a dozen or so kids in uniform were still outside, kissing goodbye to their parents and about to start their day. Jake stared at the school in wonder. It was massive and nothing like the dark single room with a supersized chalkboard that he took all his classes in back home. I want to do everything. Musicals, basketball, track, art club, science club. Jake prattled on. You hate science, Sammy interrupted. No, I don't. I love it, Jake insisted. Since when? Sammy glared at her brother. Why was Denny acting so weird? He was never this excited about school back in London. I don't know. You're a liar, Sammy whispered to Jake. Am not. Are too. Sammy kicked Jake's leg behind Quinn's back. Ow! Jake kicked back. Sammy stuck out her tongue at him. Quinn took a deep breath and separated the two children. She loved her children more than anything. But right now, they were testing her last nerve. Just a few more days and she'd be back at work after this ridiculous suspension. How dare that annoying and stuck-up Fred Smith accuse her of malpractice? As if she would ever hurt a child. He was the one letting the child's mother hurt his own son. She tried to shake off the memory of Fred Smith, but she hadn't been able to keep him or his son Jake from her mind for more than a few minutes over the past few days. She really hoped that Jake was doing okay. She believed him, even if his father did not. Leave your brother alone, Sammy. He's just excited, Quinn instructed, trying to put an end to the squabbling. Sammy crossed her arms and walked ahead. Be nice to your sister, Denny. Starting at a new school is hard, Quinn whispered to Jake. Yes, Mother, Jake murmured to Quinn. He ran to Sammy and put an arm around his sister. Sammy pretended to be mad, but Jake was too cute to ignore. Come on, Sammy, don't be mad at me, please. Jake pulled at her arm until Sammy dropped her arms. You're so annoying, Sammy shoved Jake. Yeah, but I'm your big brother, so you have to love me. Jake stuck out his tongue at her. Sammy stuck out her tongue too, but she smiled at Jake. The kids, however, failed to notice that they were about to run into Beatrice and Cheryl, loaded down with shopping bags. Hey, watch it, kids! Beatrice snarled at them. Cheryl turned up her nose at the children. How rude. Kids, watch where you're going, Quinn yelled. Apologize to the nice ladies now. We're sorry, we weren't paying attention. Jake turned toward Beatrice. But Sammy pulled him away before he got a good look at her face. Sorry. Come on, Denny, the bell is going off. Classes are about to start. As the kids ran on ahead, the snippet of Jake's voice she'd heard stopped Beatrice in her tracks. She tried to get a better look at him, but the kids were rushing to school. Sorry about them. They're just excited, Quinn explained to Beatrice before walking away. Beatrice shook her head. I'm losing my mind. I can't even shop without that kid haunting me. Finally, Beatrice and her mother, Cheryl, made it to their destination. A sky-high tower block not far from the park, where the women were meeting their lawyer, Sid Feldman. Tell us what was so urgent on the phone that we needed to rush over here. I may have discovered something. Sid pulled out a folder from his desk. Spit it out, Beatrice snapped. We haven't got all day. Something unusual about Dr. Quinn, who works at Roosevelt Memorial Hospital, Sid revealed. Beatrice stared at Sid blankly. The name doesn't ring a bell. That's because it's not her real name, Sid replied. What's her real name? Jenny Monroe. Patrice and Cheryl gasped. They ripped off their sunglasses at the same time. The surrogate? How did she get back to New York? Cheryl asked. That's not what's important to me or to you right now. What's dangerous is that she's here working at the same hospital where she delivered those 3 children. This could be a huge problem for us, Cheryl agreed. With that, Sid moved a photo across the desk of Quinn and her 2 children. Beatrice looked down at the photo. The boys look practically identical, Beatrice noted. It's almost uncanny how alike they are, Cheryl agreed. Beatrice thought back to the boy in the park, the brother and sister that had almost run straight into Beatrice and her mother, Cheryl. The girl that looked just like the one next to Quinn in this photo now. Beatrice stared at Quinn in the photo. Her eyes widened at the realization. We have to keep the boys separate from one another, Beatrice demanded. And from Fred, Cheryl added. Beatrice stood up suddenly. Where are you going? Cheryl asked, but Beatrice was already out the door. Later that afternoon, Beatrice stood by the entrance of the school she saw Quinn and her children walk into earlier that day. She had to know. She had to know if her hunch was correct. She was early, and the kids had just been released for the day. She waited for Jake, that spoiled, rotten kid, to come out. Then she saw him by the entrance. Beatrice smiled at a passing teacher and entered the courtyard. No one stopped her. She came up behind Jake with slow and measured steps. Jake, she whispered. Jake Smith, what are you doing here? Jake froze. He turned to look up at her. Jake, come say hi to your mommy. Beatrice held out her hands towards Jake. Then he ran inside the school. Beatrice replaced her sunglasses and walked out of the grounds. She had a smile on her face. Later that night at the Smith mansion, Denny stared at the chalkboard in front of him full of numbers and equations. He followed the path of numbers to the end with his worn-down piece of chalk. Very good, Jake. Now we are on to the science portion of the class. Mrs. Robin, the teacher, pulled out a hefty science book to place on the desk. Denny hated Mrs. Robin. She was too strict and tapped him with her ruler whenever he slouched or got an answer wrong. He hadn't been outside at all today. He wanted their nanny, Nora, to make him his favorite snack. He wanted his mother, Quinn, to read to him. He even wanted his dumb sister, Sammy, here to annoy him all day. I hate science. Can we do something else? Now, come on, Jake. You're my best science student this year. We can go back over the previous assignment first. Denny sat down next to Mrs. Robin again until there was a knock at the door. Oh, Jake, my sweet boy. Beatrice held out her arms towards him. Jake looked up at Beatrice. Say hi to your mother now, Jake. Mrs. Robin tapped Jake on the shoulder with her ruler. Mind your manners. You're my mom? Beatrice took a calming breath. This kid was just as spoiled as Jake was, but she had to win him over if she was ever going to remain married to Fred, and more importantly, keep her money. Yes, it's me, darling. Come downstairs. I made dinner for us. You can cook? Beatrice forced a laugh. Of course not, dear. That's what Chef Julian is for. Beatrice took Denny by the arm and led him down the stairs. Denny did not like Jake's mom. She was not as pretty or as nice as his mom, Quinn. She wore weird clothes and too much makeup. But dinner with Beatrice was better than science class. Fred Smith was stunned when he walked into the dining room to find Beatrice and Denny waiting for him. A massive dinner spread out on the table. Are you okay that Beatrice is here, Jake? Denny looked at Beatrice, who hadn't stopped smiling at him since they sat down. I guess. Denny shrugged. He was just happy that he wasn't in science class anymore. How did you even get in here? Fred snapped at Beatrice. Beatrice rolled her eyes at Fred. I still have a key. Fred sat down and glared at Beatrice. You're not welcome here, or anywhere else around Jake. I made that very clear. Beatrice placed a hand on Denny's shoulder. Look, Fred, I've apologized to Jake. He's willing to give his mother another chance. You didn't apologize to me, Denny blurted out as Beatrice's grip on his shoulder tightened. Yes, I did, sweetie, but I can say it again. I'm so sorry. Beatrice forced a smile after she spoke. Okay, Denny agreed. Beatrice finally let go of him. Beatrice smiled at Fred. She knew Fred was confused by their son's behavior. The last time Beatrice had seen the child, he had been running away at the sight of her. Now he seemed indifferent to her. Beatrice was determined to work this in her favor to get Fred back. Fred's phone rang. I have to take this. Are you all right here by yourself for a moment, Jake? Denny nodded. Fred looked unsure, but stepped out of the room. Beatrice leaned down to whisper into Denny's ear when Fred left the room. I know who you are. Denny froze mid-bite. He looked at Beatrice in the eye. She held his eye contact. You don't know anything, Denny denied. I know you're not Jake Smith. Beatrice smirked at him.
Hey, I'm Jenny. If you're wondering what happens next, download the Pocket FM app now and listen to the exciting episodes of A Mother's Battle.